Dr. Tony Holan, the state's chief medical officer, has details on those people who have died.
348 were hospitalised at some point. That's 51%. 7% or 45 were admitted to intensive care. Underlying medical conditions in 564. That's 82%.
Meanwhile, the Taoiseach has admitted it would have been better to begin testing in nursing homes sooner. Testing on residents and staff in all long-term care facilities is currently underway. Leo Varadkar says it wasn't possible to carry them out earlier.
But last week and the week before we had a massive backlog of tests, and they were tests done on people who actually had symptoms. So even if we had done it sooner, we wouldn't have got the test results, and that's just the reality of this situation.
The Cabinet Subcommittee on COVID has discussed options to tighten travel restrictions at Irish ports and airports. The committee says they must be able to stay open to allow the movement of supplies, essential workers and for Irish citizens to be able to return home. However, the risk of transmission of the virus needs to be minimised, including the requirement for people arriving into Ireland to self-restrict their movements for 14 days. A teenage boy has been handed a life sentence for murdering Cork IT student Cameron Blair in what was described as a vicious attack on a defenceless man. The boy, who can't be named because he's under 18, will have his sentence reviewed by the Central Criminal Court after 13 years. Cameron died after being stabbed in the neck while trying to act as peacekeeper at a house party in Cork City last January. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have been meeting with independent TDs across the day. Deputies Marion Harkin, Michael Fitzmaurice and Michael McNamara say their meeting with the two parties was constructive. A meeting of the regional technical group of independent TDs and Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil has also concluded. Deputy Harkin says they've agreed to further discussions.
We have a national perspective as well. So it's trying to find common ground and to see if we can. That's where we are at the moment. And our discussion today was certainly sufficient for both parties, shall we say, to agree to a further meeting.
It's 2.5 minutes past 7.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. To help in these challenging times, we've reduced the cost of our car insurance. Get our lowest price at the AA.ie.
Dry tonight with clear spells. It will be rather cold with lows of 1 to 6 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Hello there, you're very welcome along to this evening's Off the Ball. Very happy to say we have Formula 1 driver of 15 years, finished second in the O1 Championship. David Coulthard is going to join us on the show at 7:30. On Monday Night Rugby, we have Ronan O'Gara and Brian O'Driscoll running the rule on a classic game club edition. Soldier Field, New Zealand 2016 is going to be discussed by the lads. We've done this already this afternoon. Loads of good analysis from Ronan and Brian coming up after 8 o'clock. Pat Nevin will be on the football show after 9, and we'll bring you some of our chat with Ronnie Whelan from yesterday afternoon. 53106, the text number. We are at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack is ensconced in his house. Hello, sir.
How are you, Joe? You well?
Very well. Weather outside beautiful. I don't think it will ever get normal to hear the figures we're just after hearing in the news headlines. They are truly dreadful. But we will persevere on with some sport chat over the next 3 hours. And the weather's set to be nice for the rest of the week as well, I'm seeing.
Yeah, nice weather to do absolutely nothing in. To say cabin fever is set in here is kind of putting it mildly, but everybody's trying to keep entertained. Spirits lifted somewhat by Ivan finishing his show with Walking on Sunshine. For those who may have missed it, may have just tuned into News Talk over the course of the last 5 minutes, I got to hear the Katrina and the Waves classic just before we kicked off at 7 o'clock. And yeah, so my spirit has been duly lifted by Katrina and the Waves, Joe. I don't know about you, but I am walking on sunshine.
Good. Keep on counting our blessings. So we've lots to get through. I want to touch on the Wexford Mount Rushmore from this morning on OTBAM. But we should start with the news, which has really broken in the last couple of hours from Munster Rugby and James Cronin. Tell us exactly what's happened here, Rich.
Yeah, the Munster prop James Cronin banned for a month following an unintentional anti-doping violation. Cronin tested positive for 2 banned substances after Munster's Heineken Champions Cup draw away to Racing back in November. An investigation found that the 29-year-old had been feeling ill before the game and was dispensed the wrong medication at a pharmacy. Cronin is banned until May 16th and says he hopes the episode teaches his fellow players a valuable lesson.
Just in the last kind of 45 minutes or so, because I was busy recording other different bits and pieces, I had the chance to read the full report. It's not overly long and it's pretty clear. in terms of laying out what happens. So just because this is very, very serious, clearly, and not to skirt over it totally, to give you a sense of what's in the report initially. I'm sure we'll do more on this in the coming days in one way or another. But effectively, as you said, after that Racing game, he tested positive. There was no TUE. The player admitted he waived a B sample needing to be tested. He admitted that he had used the substance in competition, although he said in an entirely unintentional way. So his version of events, which is supported by evidence, they say in the report, that's how the report starts, with his version of events. As you said, Richie, he was feeling unwell. He went to the team doctor, who prescribed him with amoxicillin, and excuse my pronunciation with all of these medical prescriptions, but amoxicillin, which is an antibiotic. It's in the penicillin family. It's used for earaches, strep throat, skin issues, urinary infections, and other conditions as well. So that was the antibiotic he was prescribed. It's something that the player had used previously, had been treated with previously, and also he had used this pharmacy before as well. So the team doctor, the Munster team doctor, only told the player that he had been prescribed antibiotics. He didn't specify the name of the antibiotics to James Cronin. So then 22nd of November 2019, he was given two medicines, Germatin, which contains the aforementioned amoxicillin, and also prednisol, which is the key substance here. That's the prohibited substance. So he was given both. It turns out, according to the player's version of events here, they had been prescribed to another client of the pharmacy. Another client of the pharmacy. The name of that client is redacted in the report. I mean, the presumption is obviously that it's the same name, as will become apparent as we go on. So the point is made that the only labels on the product were James Cronin's name. So there was no date of birth on it. There was no home address on it either. He took 5 prednisol on the day before the game, as in the day he got the prescription, and then he took 4 on the morning of the game, which in the report says is pursuant to the instructions that came with the medicine. So the charge is made. There's no analysis of the B sample. The player admits the mistake, and that is where the EPCR have to decide what to do about this. Basically, if you intentionally, and first-time offender as well, if you intentionally dope, you get a 4-year ban. If it can't be proven to be intentional, then it's a 2-year ban. But that 2-year ban is subject to mitigation. Now, James Cronin here has been given a 1-month ban. So here is the mitigation. This is what has reduced what would have been a 2-year ban to a 1-month ban. They talk in the report about evidence which is specific and detailed. So what that evidence is, there is a statement from the Munster team doctor to back up the version of events. There is a copy of the prescription which was given. There is also a copy of the email which the team doctor sent to the pharmacy. So the prescription was not given to James Cronin. It was emailed to the pharmacy on his behalf by the doctor, and he went along and picked up his medicine. There is also, fourthly, a copy of the dispensing form which shows the wrong medication was given to the player. Fifthly, there are photos of labelling on the product. Sixth, there is video footage of the player collecting the medication. Seventh, the Cologne lab which did the test, they say that his version of events is scientifically plausible, as in the amounts in his system tally with his version of events. So at that point then, the EPCR is looking at a liability of no fault whatsoever, effectively. So no fault is the technical term, no fault or no significant fault. Now, the reason he's been given a ban, the reason this is not a case of no fault, and the reason it is a case of no significant fault, is that the EPCR do say that the player could have, James Cronin could have done more, and they outline what he could have done. So, for instance, he didn't ask his doctor what he had been prescribed. He didn't get a copy of the prescription, which was emailed to the pharmacy. They also make the point that even though he had received this previously, and on this occasion he was given 2 sets of medication instead of 1, he didn't question that. So he'd been treated previously with this. This time around he gets 2 sets of medication instead of 1. The EPCR make the argument that that maybe should have raised a question mark in the player's head. Thirdly, they say of the banned substance, prednisone. This is the first time the player had taken it. James Cronin had taken it. So the EPCR say, well, you never Googled the ingredients. A simple search would have shown up that there were banned substances in prednisone. Secondly, they argued that on the leaflet with the medication, it said it was a steroid medicine. So again, they say that maybe should have raised a question mark in the player's head. And then ultimately they say as well, players or any athletes cannot rely blindly on doctors' advice. That is the concept of strict liability, which has been in effect for some time now. Players are responsible. So therefore, they conclude that James Cronin can't say there is no fault. They accept the argument that there is no significant fault, but they don't accept that there is no fault. And they conclude that they do accept his version of events, but he is being given a 1-month ban. And obviously for him, his name goes around the world now. You Google it, and this is a first doping offence against his name. In terms of the length of ban, I'm not an expert in how long a ban is sufficient or not. Certainly, it could have been worse, to say the least. Like Ashley Johnson of rugby was given a 6-month ban when he confused his wife's weight loss pills for his own. They were left in a very similar container in the kitchen. He took the wrong pills. In tennis, Marin Cilic got 4 months. His mother bought glucose tablets mistakenly. The doctor, assuming they were glucose tablets, said, yeah, they're fine. And he got 4 months. At the more extreme end, where people have been really punished for this in a serious way, and again, I've only come across this case in a serious way in the last 20 minutes or so, but Teresa Johog, she was given 18 months. She's a skier and she missed the Winter Olympics. She took clostebol, which is a steroid, and this was because she had a sunburn. Skier, she got sunburn on her lips. She had blisters on her lips, and she was given this by the doctor. And initially she's given 13 months, and then she appealed it and she got 18 months. They felt 13 was too lenient. Now, part of the reason they gave her such a hefty ban was that there was a label in red with the packaging which highlighted that it was a doping product, effectively, or against the rules. There was a very clear warning on the labelling, which is one of the reasons her ban was so significant. But it certainly could have been worse for James Cronin, but the EPCR have accepted his version of events, backed up and supported by evidence. So that's where I am in this story at the moment. I've just read through the report and it's out there for anyone to have a read, and James Cronin has held his hands up in the statement. So that is the latest on that situation, and I suspect it's something that we'll come back to, or Munster may have more to say about it, or James Cronin may have more to say about it. So, Richie, where are we going next?
The GAA's financial situation could prove very, very grave if a long period without games is to continue. A special Congress on Friday passed the decision-making powers of the association into a 16-person management committee. They'll have the power to alter this year's championships. But the GAA's Director of Communications, Alan Milton, has told Off the Ball that a year without inter-county games could cost them €60 million.
We're certainly hopeful. I think you're right. The weekend represented something of a water change if those sentiments are to ring true. To the best of my knowledge, what we heard is not official government policy as of yet, and we'd expect it to be communicated differently if it becomes official government policy. Having said that, the Minister for Health has a responsibility to citizens to outline what he sees are the threats and the realities that all citizens of Ireland have to face, not just sporting people. I think it's really important to make that point, Chair, that we all get caught up in the minutiae of sport, but there's people with far bigger issues at hand, frontline workers and people with sick people in their families. So I think there's an element of perspective required. I think most people who have watched this and followed the story would accept that club activity is far likelier to return earlier, and that's very obvious as to why that might be in terms of smaller crowds turning up to watch games. Although I did joke to somebody over the weekend, if there was a Junior B game on here in my club, there'd be 500 people at it in the morning. But I think the inter-county game is going to necessitate a very different conversation. And it's not just Gaelic games, it's sport. And it's not just sport in Ireland, it's global sport.
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. I mean, we've talked about it. Increasingly, I'm pessimistic. Just when you look at the situation in its entirety, these are amateur players at an inter-county level. The likes of Jack McCaffrey is working in a hospital. It gets very, very tricky. It's not like professionals where you can effectively quarantine the whole team and everybody concerned with the team. So increasingly, I suspect we won't be seeing even behind closed doors matches at inter-county level. Just a point of clarification, Richie, on my summary of the EPCR report. Just to make clear, that was by an independent judicial officer. Anthony Davies is his name. Yeah. I referenced it as the EPCR said this and the EPCR said that. It's an Anthony Davies, not the EPCR, but everything else still stands. I presume that outline was clear enough, was it?
Yes, I think you pretty much captured everything there.
Very good. Where are we going next?
Arsenal, they've announced that their first team squad, along with head coach Mikel Arteta and his backroom team, will all take pay cuts. Starting from this month, they'll all see 12.5% reductions in their salaries. The agreement is based, though, on the assumption that the current season is finished and that the club receive their full broadcasting revenues. Meanwhile, Sheffield United manager Chris Wilder at Barmay has agreed to take a partial pay and bonus deferral to help that club's cash flow during the coronavirus pandemic. No Premier League football has been played since the 9th of March, and Chief Executive of Sheffield United, Stephen Bettis, has also deferred some of his pay. The savings will assist the club in retaining other staff while continuing to pay 100% of their salaries.
Yeah. Where are we going next?
To the RDS, Joe, because the Dublin Horse Show has been cancelled for the first time since 1940. The RDS say the decision has been made with great regret and is the result of the coronavirus pandemic. Discussions, though, are underway with the International Equestrian Federation regarding dates for the 2021 Horse Show. The 5-day event usually attracts around 100,000 people to the Ballsbridge venue. World number one, Novak Djokovic, could be prevented from returning to tennis action as he opposes being vaccinated against the coronavirus. There is a push for all players to get a vaccine, provided one exists, before action can resume on the courts. Former women's number one, Amelie Mauresmo, tweeted earlier on to say no vaccine equals no tennis.
And that's it's a hell of a stance Novak's taken, but there we are.
I think the ITF are waiting to see if Djokovic is just the simple matter of an anti-vaxxer, or whether he is opposed to basically being given a treatment for returning to the court. But as you say, it's a hell of a stance.
Leo Cullen then, finally, Rich?
Yeah, he says the province, Leinster that is, are open to playing games behind closed doors. The European and Pro 14 seasons are currently suspended with no timeline for a return. While conceding that playing in empty stadiums would be strange, Cullen said this afternoon will be better than no games at all.
Obviously it takes away, because what supporters bring to the sport, and certainly we've been unbelievably lucky over the last number of years in terms of the involvement that our supporters have had. And yeah, they would be denied potentially being in the stadium, but hopefully it will be better than nothing, and obviously it allows us to get sport back up and running as well.
There's a few texts in, a few people, Richie, curious about the Wexford Mount Rushmore. So this was on OTBAM this morning, well worth checking out. Mount Rushmore series continues. Offtheball.com, you'll get OTBAM in all the usual places on our social channels. The Go Loud app is where you can stream the show every morning. The lads are coming at you Monday to Friday. So it was Gizzy Ling and Lynn Griffin. They were picking the Wexford Mount Rushmore. They went for Billy Walsh, Nicky Reckard, Matty Ford and George O'Connor. Text in, lads, GAA bias a bit on that panel. No Kevin Doyle, no Gordon Darcy, no Aidan O'Brien. Richie, talk to me.
I don't want to base this purely on numbers, but from a purely numbers standpoint, this is how you regard success, is when you look down through Aidan O'Brien's records, both here and especially in the UK, with victories, like major victories, grade ones and group ones, and flat racing and over the jumps. Like, his numbers are absolutely staggering. It's a popular opinion to put Billy Walsh in that Mount Rushmore conversation, but if we're going to have a coach in there, I would probably myself, just based on track record and sheer longevity and continued success at a very high level since the mid-90s and continuing to this day, for me, O'Brien will be in there. But then again, I'm not a Wexford man, what do I know? And Kevin Doyle, I think, is very unlucky to miss out too.
I was just going to say, I feel like the international component. Okay, so if they left O'Brien out because he trains horses and they feel this isn't true sport in the sense that they want to reflect Mount Rushmore, I feel, without picking on absolute legends here, Matty Ford, George O'Connor, anyone who's played in the Premier League, I think in the vast majority of counties, for as long as Kevin Doyle did as well, and international goals, the international arena, I think they really have to be on Mount Rushmore. It's like the biggest meritocracy out there. To play in the Premier League is just a phenomenal achievement, and there is an amazing community value to doing it for your GAA county and your club. And Matty Ford, George O'Connor, legends, and culturally, they give something obviously very, very special. But I really think Kevin Doyle has to be on Mount Rushmore. And, not far behind him, I'd have to say, given what he achieved on the international stage, which I accept is not available to GAA players. But Gordon Darcy, for a long time, was peak of his powers. So a touch of GAA bias is the accusation from the texter. I can see it. But then I'm really not going to come out too strongly against the likes of Matty Ford or George O'Connor, who are legends in their own right. I do have Billy Walsh in there. He transformed Irish boxing into a world leader, a medal winner. So I think Billy Walsh is okay by me. And come next summer, when the USA probably close to dominate the Olympic Games, I think Billy's place will be very safe indeed.
Yeah. Again, it's not these conversations are really difficult because you're not denigrating anything that anybody has done. You're not to say Billy Walsh transforming the Irish boxing scene at an amateur level isn't seismic, but again, if you're going to compare apples with oranges, I'd kind of pick an orange in Aidan O'Brien at the moment, just because the sheer numbers and the longevity of his successes just completely stacks up for me. Yeah. And if it's going to be a coach for coach, then it'll be O'Brien for me. But like you say, I think the glaring one there is Kevin Doyle, and he probably deserves the recognition. The weird thing is on the Limerick one, because I know that's the one that's coming up next, I've seen a few, I'm privy to the Twitter mentions for Off the Ball, and I've seen a fair few mentioned JP McManus, even though we mentioned there, horse training might necessarily be valid in some people's eyes, but there have been a few. That's all I'm saying, Joe. I'm not saying the jury is going to pick him, but I'm saying he's definitely being talked about.
No, well, he shouldn't be. Absolutely not. No, I'm not accepting that. No. There's a text in on Cronin. So why have they banned this guy? Personally, I defer to my doctor and pharmacist when it comes to the drugs I take. I don't second question the experts, says Sean. I suppose, Sean, the short answer, and we have to get to an ad break, and we can talk about this some more during the week, but the short answer is strict liability, and an athlete is responsible for what they put in their body. There is a higher threshold, and Mr. Davies, the independent judicial author of the report, says he didn't ask the doctor what he'd been prescribed or for a copy of the prescription, because that was emailed to the pharmacy. He should have done that. Didn't question why 2 sets of medication instead of 1. His first time taking prednisol, they say never Googled the ingredients. Simple search would have shown up very clearly that this was on the banned list. It said a steroid medicine on the leaflet. And again, ultimately, players can't just rely blindly on the doctor's advice. So therefore, the verdict is no significant fault as opposed to no fault. So strict liability for athletes is ultimately the short answer to your text. We're going to take a short break. We recorded Brian Driscoll and Ron Nagara earlier this afternoon, looking back at Chicago in 2016. But up next, a Formula One driver for 15 years, no less, David Coulthard on the show.